Hello everyone, this is the Eachine Tyro79. It comes as a kit that must be assembled, featuring 1607 2800 kV motors, an F4 flight controller with an OSD, a 20 amp 4-in-1 ESC, the flight stack is soft mounted, I added these 4 O-rings, a 200 milliwatt VTX, mine had smart audio, a 700 TV line camera, mine did not work. Stock, it comes with these 2-year-old props. I use Dow 3056 props. It does come with an XT30 for your battery connection. It does come with these 2 carbon fiber wrenches, a rubber piece for your battery mounting, a carbon fiber piece for the bottom of your battery, and 2 foam pieces to stick to that. Also comes with an extra set of prop nuts, various odds and ends, and an extra cable. Bottom plate is 3mm. Carbon on the sides looks like it's 1mm. The metal on the pod looks like it's 4mm. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting 140mm. With the dowel props, mine weighs 156 grams. Before we arm, take a note at the tree. It is blowing a little bit, and also the battery is not quite full, so the flight time will be a little bit greater than what I show here. I am flying with a G&B 550 4S battery. You could fly a much larger battery. You can get a much longer flight time. I like to use small batteries because they tend to stay light, because these big powerful machines like this can tend to shrink the yard if I go too heavy, and then it'll drag me around in turns. This is a bottom mounted battery, so it can give you a little bit of that pendulum effect. I didn't think it was too bad, but I'm fairly used to that. You know, a lot of micros, most micros as a matter of fact, they use a bottom mounted battery, so that doesn't affect me too much. But if I get a heavier battery on there, then I do feel it, especially as I swing around these trees. It gives you a little bit momentum if you're in an open space where you want to throw it over a tree or something of that nature. As we throw it over the house, for example, I was actually fairly pleasantly surprised with this machine. You know, it's $79. Now the downside is there's been various kits. I've had a few people message me about this. I'm a little late to the game. The first one that was sent to me was sent back by customs. I don't know why. So Banggood sent another one. And then the weather and all the things that have delayed me putting out flight videos hasn't really cooperated. But lately the weather's been nice. But, you know, my camera didn't work. I've heard flight controllers didn't work. There was, I think, a motor on one was bound up. You know, I can't verify all these things. All I can tell you is that my camera definitely didn't work. I also had one other interesting little bit to where when I plugged in a battery for the first time without the camera plugged in, I did find that I was getting a short, and I had a smoke stopper plugged in and I couldn't figure out what was going on. It took me a little while, and I was plugging in the camera and unplugging the camera trying to see if it was something else was going on. Maybe it needed that circuitry to be completed for some reason. As it turns out, because I use blue tack, and I've been using the same clump of blue tack for almost a year, that I had a little bit of the blue tack stuck on the bottom, and apparently it had a metal shaving in it, and thankfully it did not blow my flight controller. It did cause me a couple hours of pondering what was going on. You see I've got the battery warning coming up here, and we're just a little bit over 2 minutes. I'm going to nurse this a little bit so we can go for one last punch out. I'm going to cruise along the backside here and hope that battery comes down. There we go. One last one on a battery sag. Not too bad, really. Not too bad at all. I can't complain about that. So I was pretty happy, and you know, we're getting 2 minutes and 30 seconds of flight on a relatively small battery. You could easily fly a 650 if you wanted to. So the camera that I put in, because mine did not work, is the Caddx Micro Turbo F1. And I have the original camera over here, and you see I have the connector off of it. And that's because the cable that comes with its stock does not fit the connector that we have over here. The easy solution when your connector doesn't fit on your camera is to just pluck it off, grab it on the sides with a pair of needle nose, get fairly deep so you get some backing on the connector, and then just kind of wiggle it, wiggle it, wiggle it. In my case, it didn't matter because the camera didn't work anyways. I've heard these cameras are pretty bad. A couple of other things on the build note. I don't suggest that you go through and do the things that I did as far as wiring of the motors. They have this terrible plastic on it, which I suspect has been complained about all over the place. You can actually see where mine got hot and where I was holding it with the needle nose, and it kind of melted the plastic sheathing a bit. I would recommend leaving them at their stock length. They're exposed, and I believe they were tinned, and just looping them underneath the flight controller around to your ESC pads for your building purposes. If by chance you cut yours and you're wondering how the heck do I solder these things, basically take a knife. I used a pair of fingernail clippers and scrape along all the edges of the exposed copper. They've got some sort of, something's been painted on those wires, some sort of enamel or something that makes soldering on these things a nightmare. So scrape, 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 and after you get enough scraping, you'll be able to get enough heat to the metal, and you will be able to solder those on. It's not pretty, but it did work, and you saw the flight footage. It's been just fine. Something else to note is there's really nowhere that I can see to secure our battery lead, which kind of worries me a little bit. If you're real creative, you might be able to get a zip tie down through there. It's really not long enough to get to an arm. You could extend this or use your own if you want to. I just don't suspect too many people that would be buying this kit are going to have the extra XT30 and battery gauge wire in order laying around in order to make it longer or to just make one of your own. That's why I mentioned these things here. This is really a kit that I think its primary value comes in the fact that it is so cheap and you can get build experience for very few dollars, and there's not that much soldering to have to do. Once you get the ESCs on here, everything else is connector based. The only thing you'll have to solder on would be your receiver, which it does not come with. Some might think this is a good spot to put a battery, but it's awful small. Typically you're going to have to put your battery down here. It does come with this battery strap, which is a little bit narrow for my taste. Now, we're seeing more 4S batteries come in this narrow format, but the ones I chose to use, those G&B 550s, are a little bit wider. So you have to work at mounting those a little bit more to make sure they're snug. I also didn't use the bottom plate on the bottom of the battery. I just don't see a purpose in that. If you want to protect your batteries, you're free to use that. I've just been flying bottom mounted batteries for so long unprotected, I didn't see the point in fussing with that extra piece every time I put the battery on and off. I did wire up a FrSky XM, so this one wouldn't have the range that you might find with an XM Plus or other receivers, but for my flying spaces, it does work just fine. I also added the electrical tape to hold the wires down, which probably isn't necessary because they're so stiff. I seriously doubt they would come up. Also, that does help if you go through a tree, that a tree limb won't necessarily get between the wires and your arm, so it's less likely to get hung up. A little bit less likely. I'll put my PIDs on screen. I do think my Ps are a little bit high for this guy. I think they could come down, I would say anywhere from 3 to 6 on pitch and roll. I would start with pitch because that's where I saw in the DVR footage that I was getting a little bit of chop. You may have to pump up P just ever slightly, but I would start with lowering P because usually when you have these big powerful motors, these aren't terribly torquey motors, but usually when you have these bigger motors, you kind of run less high on your P gain. But that's just my tuning preference. Yours might be different. Also, I think if I were to pick again, I would probably use gem fan props. Many of you may be big fans of these style of props. They work just fine. You saw it. I just don't like how they corner. I've tried these a couple of times, and I keep finding the same things. These, and I think the HQs. There's another prop that's designed fairly similar to this, and I just find they don't corner quite like I want. I find the gem fans corner a little bit better, and I do a lot of cornering. That's something else to consider in the flight time, is even though I only was using a 450 milliamp 4S battery and I got 2 minutes and 30 seconds about, you may get more flight time depending upon how much cornering you're doing, because you do have to ride the throttle through those corners in order to maintain a good altitude, keep your nose down, and stay nice and smooth. You may get less flight time if you do a lot of big punch outs. If you're wanting to fly over stuff all the time, your flight time could be negatively impacted as well. The camera's good and protected for the most part. You can see there that the edge of the lens sticks out just a touch, so if you center a tree, you may get damage, but you know, that's pretty much always the case anymore. There's not much more you can do to protect your camera here than what they've already done. I do believe this design has actually been done before by a different company, probably Armaton. It seems like I've seen it before. If you know, go ahead and leave a comment down below where this design originally came from. I'd be very curious to know. So for 79 bucks, what do you think? Even if you had to replace the camera, is this a good value or not? Leave your comment down below. If you have build tips for others that might come to the video and are interested in this product, if you have build tips, leave those down below. Help kind of build the community knowledge base of people that might be entering. Remember, this is probably for beginners. This isn't something that I suspect too many of you experienced veteran pilots are going to be buying. I think this is something that is probably going to be purchased by a lot of first-time pilots, and that's just fine. I'm actually quite happy with the performance. Even if I had to buy this camera on PyroDrone right now is running $19.99. So if we just round that up to 80 bucks for the quad, a failed camera, and then another 20 bucks for the camera, we've only got 100 bucks. And I don't know if you can buy a 3-incher for $100. So not bad. I'm not disappointed in this. It's not going to be a top performer. It's not going to win you any races when it comes to racing against its 5-inch big brothers, but it'll get you in the air. It'll get you some building experience. You can use the tune that I've shown you on screen. You can switch to these props that I've shown you already, and you can have a good time. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.